Great. Thank you so much. Such a great conference so far. Thank you so much. I'm honored to be here. The panel and the talks highlighted some challenges that people have when trying to gain buy-in for value stream mapping. And so hopefully that's what we're going to talk through today. Um, Really at by the end of our time here, I hope that you're really going to understand what value streams are and how to get started. I added this slide like seconds ago because I wanted people to understand. I went to a talk and I delivered a variation of this talk at a conference that was a Microsoft Tools, Technology, and Cloud Native Software Development Conference in November. And it was a totally new concept for 48% of people, and 33% said they had heard of it. And so I do think it's still a new concept for folks to wrap their heads around. So as we go through this, I'm going to share some tips and tricks along the way for those people who might just be getting started with value streams and value stream mapping. So this has been the one challenge. It's not sharing what the value stream is or why they're an important concept, but it was how to get started. And over the years, people have been asking me, Heidi, you talk about value streams all the time. I want to know, like, I can't get buy-in inside my organization. So this is my journey of trying to get buy-in through those throughout organizations. If you don't know anything about me yet, I have been in all roles in Agile types of organizations, finally leading Agile transformations in multiple companies. That led me to, of course, do lots and lots of workshops, including value stream mapping and my attempts at gaining buy-in for value stream mapping. And so that led me to draft a book, which is almost done, but that was put on hold while I was finishing my data science program at MIT because I really saw how AI was going to change how we think about many things, including productivity. And so that's what I'm doing right now. I combine people first process improvements with generative AI tools like AI chatbots. So that's me. For those of you who are new to value stream mapping, I love the concept of thinking about the coffee shop, right? You're walking into a coffee shop, there's people waiting in front of you, and there are the people behind the counter. And the value stream is everything that's required to transform your request for a cup of coffee into that cup of coffee that you want. So when you ordered your Frappuccino and the experience that you have getting your Frappuccino is about the communication, the materials, the information at the handoffs that happen behind the counter. You may not see it, right? But it's the systems, the materials, the processes that are in place so that you can get the correct coffee. It's hot, it's the right one, the right size. In essence, that's the value stream, right? All those activities behind the counter from the person taking your payment systems, et cetera. So if you get to the end of the line and you've gotten someone else's coffee or it's cold or it's the wrong size, you're not going to be happy. And so when we talk about that value stream and all those activities, the assumption is it's something that you want, right? It's something of value. Otherwise, it's just wasted effort and materials, of course. The other thing that people talk about a lot is this concept of what is really going on in the value stream. It's easy to see when I walk into a coffee shop. It's less visible when we have knowledge work. It's visible and painful to the people who are experiencing it in the teams and the painful things that we say, I've been waiting for so long for this. So we feel the pain, but then other people outside don't really see what's going on with that. So there are three criteria for value adding activities. And I put this here because when I'm talking through this, I want you to think about your own organization, right? So if I got my Frappuccino and I go to the end and it's a mocha instead, well, you'd be upset. It's not what you wanted. And no amount of convincing you is going to make you want that other cup of coffee instead. Imagine then that on Tuesdays, folks come in and they order lots of Americanos. So the staff goes and makes a lot of Americanos, but nobody shows up for those that day. And so then an hour later, I show up and I want an Americano and they give me a cold one. So that's definitely, so the Americanos that don't reach the customer are definitely not value adding activities. And of course, when I get my cold Americano, it is definitely not the quality that I expect. So, right, any other activity except for those things are waste. So begin to think about that as in your own organization of the waste that you're experiencing. The challenge with value creation is that, well, as we know, it crosses organizational structures. So again, I like to have a different way of looking at things. So let's think about an insurance company. The when I'm getting a new insurance policy, to do that, it means the different departments inside that insurance company need to communicate with each other. I don't care what departments they are. That is invisible to me. I just want my new insurance policy. So if I have a good experience, those internal departments there, they each have their own processes, policies, and procedures, but they are communicating well with each other because we're crossing, the information flow and the tools that they have and the structures and the people, they're communicating well. Now I'm happy with my new insurance policy. If you file an insurance claim and you have a poor experience, oftentimes that means that those internal departments aren't collaborating and communicating well amongst each other, right? So whether it's you filing an insurance claim or another experience that you may have that's a poor customer experience, it's usually because they have optimized for their own internal processes rather than your own experience, right? So this is going to be very elementary for some of you, but I want to orient folks to understanding that maybe these are some ways that you can also begin to get buy-in for value stream mapping. Of course, companies have many value streams and substreams. So when you submit your insurance claim, there might be a couple of teams supporting that when your claim processing. And of course, others just support those other value streams as well. So imagine everybody communicating. This is, of course, a very simplified view here because we're not including a lot of the tools and information flow here. So just imagine this is a very simplified view, of course. The problem is that with most transformations, including the things that we've talked about in some of the earlier talks, where they only happen in a small part of the value stream. So thanks to this plan view diagram here, we discover that, well, we've gone agile, but we're not really responsive. We still spend a lot of our time with these heavy upfront funding and planning processes. And of course, 44% of the time is still wasted in these release activities. And so most engineers, well, even now I hear people talking about individual productivity, developer productivity, but what will happen if we make these developers even more productive? It's not going to really do anything to the whole value stream. And that's actually what's making me sad about this. These co-pilots where they're talking about developers being able to do twice or 10x their work. Well, you're not even looking at the whole picture. And so that won't really speed things up. Can't 10x your code and expect the whole value stream to change. So then people have come to me and said, well, but we're using DORA, but DORA metrics alone are insufficient. They are great for their own purpose, right? But the DORA lead time metric doesn't measure the whole value stream. So we're missing almost 48% of the time, right? It measures from code commit to code deploy. But what we really should be measuring is from ideation, when work is accepted into the value stream, and then when work is delivered into production. So again, this is just a view that I came up with that will help you understand DORA metrics alone are always, just a piece of the puzzle. And of course, they don't measure value. And so I'm going to tell you a story that's based on a true story. It's called the Lost API. And imagine Alex is just got hired on at Good Life Insurance, and he's so excited to be in that nice office. Good Life Insurance has been around for 100 years. They are trying to modernize their work, and believe it or not, they start out in COBOL and they've converted a lot to Java. Now they're moving to the cloud. And the policy information management team is the one that maintains the databases and information about insurance policy. So they're really the clearinghouse for anything that's related to insurance policy. So the problem that Alex's team faces is they have a lot of one-off data retrieval requests. That's time-consuming, and that doesn't let them do new development work that's requested. They know it's not ideal. And with Alex on board, who has experience building APIs, the team thinks they can pull it off. So they go ahead, they get approval to build the API. It will solve the data access issues. Everyone's excited. It will free the team up, and even provide a proof of concept for the rest of the organization. So they view this as like really something amazingly super. So cool. Going to reduce dependencies, reduce toil. Team is very excited. They complete the API, but then things stop moving. So paste in the chat if this is if this resonates with you, right? The API requires reviews before deployment. Security's backlog. Nobody's thought about that before. The team is frustrated. They move to new initiatives, and other departments made plans for the API, and now they're stuck as well because they relied on this coming up, right? So what next? A few months go by. the API is still not deployed. In the real story, it was more like 9 months, but this is Alex, so we're saying a few months. So Alex's manager wants to keep him happy, and he agrees it's not ideal. Certainly not the first time that this is happening at Good Life Insurance, though. So he talks to some friends and hears about the concept of value streams and value stream mapping with someone he spoke about the problem. So now we're going to move, now that you understand value streams and, poor Alex's team and the API, Chris's friend told him that value stream mapping can act like a system diagnostic. And that really resonated with Chris. So we're going to design maybe even a better future state of working. This is another story that resonate with people, another way of expressing what value streams and value stream mapping are. Really, when we do a mapping activity, it's going to orient people and teams to a shared direction with a purpose. So imagine you've ordered something online. And so guy gets in the truck and, you're expecting your delivery to be there the next day, or you even maybe open up your app and you see, oh, it's 3 stops away. Well, most businesses today, and I'm sure many of you already know this, they operate as though the driver wakes up, gets out of bed, doesn't check the gas tank, doesn't check to see the tires or any pressure, or maybe even if there are any boxes in the back, but they just start driving. And as a customer, it doesn't really matter to you where the truck is. And if it says 3 stops away, unless it's going to be pretty soon. So the idea of value stream mapping is to get everyone together toward this shared vision and see the whole map and picture. It turns out there are 8 wastes when delivering value. And these were adapted for software development by Mary and Tom Poppendick. And let's talk about which of the 8 wastes did Alex's team experience just with what you know of the story so far. Handoffs. Certainly, they had some handoffs. They're waiting for the security team. Partially done work. Well, certainly the API isn't out there yet, is it? Task switching. Well, they've moved on to new projects, and they're going to have to switch back to thinking about the API months later. That has a cost. Delays to the start or progress of a value-adding activity. Well, everyone's waiting for that. Relearning. Well, they're going to have to just relearn some of those things when they're task switching. Extra features. Well, that's not really unclear if they have or not, but could be. Defects. Well, probably they're hidden defects because the code hasn't been fully tested or used yet. That might come out later. And unused talent. So Alex's team is wasting time on toil. They've been doing this for a very long time now. Things that could be automated through the API. So this is actually an exercise that I go through when I usually start a value stream mapping activity, is talk through which of the wastes they are experiencing so far, because that gets people moving. It turns out that the typical percentage of time that work is actually being worked on inside organizations is only 2 to 5%. So even in Karen Martin's book and other Ask consultants, and then I was finally told when I was doing this research, well, that's actually optimistic. It could be as low as 1%. I'm sharing this story because these are all statistics that I shared with senior leaders in my role, leading agile transformations at a director, sometimes VP level inside organizations, right? Could you imagine what we could do with all this? It's going to be such an easy sell. Who would want that kind of state inside their organization? We need to fix this. So I'm approaching these leaders going like, let's do this. We need to do this. This was their reaction though. Meh, still not good. Nobody was impressed. I tried various things. And including all the, statistics and trying to empathy and understanding. So these are some of the quotes that I have, actual quotes from people. Safe consultants told us we're not a value stream, so we don't need this activity. And that's one thing that I found, is that people conflated the value stream identification with value stream mapping. So they thought they've already done it. They don't need to do it anymore. I don't want to reorganize my teams. We just had a reorg, too much chaos from a VP of product. Well, you don't have to reorganize necessarily, but it's going to be a great step in understanding the pain points, right? So the teams were actually so confused after the reorg because they ditched their entire process and they were trying to start all over again. So yeah, we did that 3 years ago. No need to do it again. Well, yeah, probably maybe, a lot of things have changed since then. So now would be a great time to do it. Oh, we're about to have a reorg, so this is bad timing. Well, hopefully that might inform your reorg. And this is just standard SDLC. Everyone knows it. But this was an initiative that was basically a new product that they were launching. The team had been working, and there were 25 teams and nobody really knew what was going on. So, and my favorite, and I use that word sarcastically, we shouldn't do this because we don't even know who our customers are. So I was in an audience with 67 senior directors and VPs, and I had hired someone to do a value stream mapping activity. We had funding, and all I needed was a person to say that they wanted this to happen inside their organization. So I finished my 20-minute little presentation. I'm like, hey, we're ready to do, anyone wants to do value stream mapping. And the CPTO says, oh, Heidi, thank you so much. We don't need this, we shouldn't do this, or we don't even know who our customers are. So this was like a moment for me when I realized I'm overselling my audience, right? I'm trying to sell long workshops where executives are active participants. They got so much going on, right? They're bought into the principles of lean and agile, and they actually care about value streams. They didn't care. And also if we do that whole long workshop with executives, it does mean they might be committing to years-long transformational activities. It is absolutely a transformational workshop when you do that. And they just weren't ready for that. So I had to take a step back, right? Value stream mapping is a commitment to change. Weeks and weeks of planning, uncovering the information, digging it up, getting those group of executives and people together. And then not only that, but your action plan. So even if you could convince, this was my moment, right? Even if I could convince them to show up somehow, that they would never do the work. I clearly had to go back to the drawing board. So again, this is a beautiful from the VSM Consortium State of Value Stream Management report. Now you get to understand why some people were not quite ready, because it hasn't hit the, that across the chasm, right, in the Jeffrey Moore. So it's the early majority are just starting to map value streams, and forget it. The innovators are using tools to map and manage value streams, but we may be working in an environment where they are, so-called laggards. Maybe they're not even aware of value stream mapping or value stream management yet. So where you are in your organization is really going to depend. This diagram basically, think about where are you working in a laggard environment? Are you working in an innovator environment? Then maybe you've already done these activities. So that kind of resonated with me. So I thought, what if there's a more lightweight way to get started? Okay, so back to Alex's team, right? We're talking about this lightweight approach that I've been developing over years, of attempting to do this activity, realizing that the heavyweight activity wasn't going to work. And so I'm going to start off with this. I love the full diagrams, but when people start getting excited about value stream mapping, and I talk about them in the conferences, I've seen people say, like, I don't even understand. I can't even see a map of a value stream that might resonate with me. So if you see these diagrams, don't get intimidated. You can actually start with a lot less complex diagram started. So here's what you need for lightweight value stream mapping. You just need a few willing coworkers and some marker and sticky notes or an online whiteboard. And I've done them both very successfully, both in person and using an online whiteboard like Mural or Miro. So there are 4 steps for lightweight value stream mapping, PCIP. Prepare, like you would do for any meeting, collaborate, ideate, and plan. So I'm going to go through each of these one by one. This next phase is going to talk about, so it's this whole talk is about demystifying value stream mapping. So I'm going to talk about how you're going to do it, right? From step by step. You're going to decide the value stream you'd like to map. So you want to make sure that you have a customer at the end. That's not an internal process. So that's step number 1. You'd have to prepare for that anyway. As you're preparing for this, what problem are you trying to solve? Harkening back to Good Life Insurance and Alex's team, what problem are we trying to solve? Well, why is the API not in production yet? That's kind of where our starting point is. Who should be there? Well, reps from teams who contribute to that value stream, understanding why is the API not in production yet? So we're still in our preparation stage. So I advise, pick a value stream that's a high priority, has unhappy customers, or challenges like delivery, reliability, or quality. So you wouldn't pick one where nobody sees a problem at all. So we're going to call this one Policy Information Access and Management, because that is the team that Alex is working on. And who is our customer? right? So in your value stream, you have a customer. Well, we want to think about internal teams and insurance agents who are consuming the information that we are producing, right? And the third one is setting the scope. The scope, or boundaries or guardrails, are really where you're starting and ending your value stream map. Your value stream map can be really narrow, or it can go out forever, but you have to pick a scope so that you know which people should be there in the value stream mapping activity. So in this case, we were deciding, well, I'm going to start with a customer problem has been identified, and then the end, the feature is running in production. So we just want to cover that whole area. Step number 2, okay, now we've decided the value stream, and we're going to, step number 2 is collaborate. So I'm going to pause here and mention that it's ideal to have collected some sort of data, because part of what we talk about is duration and delays. One of the challenges that I have personally experienced in software development is a lack of reliable data on how long things take. The tool isn't being properly used. Let me just take a simple example. I work with more than a few teams who split their stories at the end of a sprint to get credit for the part that was done. So they created a new story, they closed it immediately with the done points they got, and then pulled the original story forward. And so what did that do to the metrics? They had a bunch of 0-minute ones going on there, and then ones that took many, many weeks. So be aware with the data, and of course the data always comes with a story. So if you have the data, that's great. Absolutely do collect it. In my experience, I haven't been able to get at the data in my level, but because the data doesn't exist, we're looking at different kinds of tools across different teams, or being used improperly. So also, if you lead with the data that you have received, people tend to get defensive. So they may not have the data, but they know where the pain points are. So I'll say, don't let lack of data stop you, and forge ahead with what we can do. So keep the data if you have it, and know that it comes with a story. And if you don't, please don't let that stop you.
Hey, Heidi,
Yep.
a couple of questions. I don't know if you want to pose,
Yeah.
but
Yep.
they're around collecting data. What type of data or metrics? If you go back to Dana's at 209, are you using cycle time and lead time? Then there's question about what type
Yep.
of data. So I don't know if you want me to read them out or just in general
Yep.
comment.
So I'll say, talk to people about what data is going to be relevant for them. So absolutely, lead time, cycle time is absolutely data that you will collect. You want to know how long things take in the stage that they're in, and then the lead time if you have it, and of course if there's any data on the wait time, like the amount of time is just in a waiting state, because you're going to need that for your you'll see as I do this, you're going to need that information. So that's absolutely data you can collect, and even via you could even collect it via interviews informally, and just asking a bunch of people if you have no other way of collecting that data. What other questions?
The other one is like just like Jesse mentioned, how the picking the scope of value stream mapping or what to map, I think. And do you have any advice on that? I think you a
Yeah.
little bit on it. Don't make it important, and how to select. But is there anything else that you would add on to that?
So imagine that you could only get buy-in for a certain group of people, but maybe I'll just use an example. If product managers are building the features up front, and then you can't get them to even agree to attend, are you going to include that part of the value stream in there? Or are you mapping, a smaller part of the value stream? So clearly you're going to get different results. And it would be then up to you to decide, okay, how wide do I make the value stream? Do I include it from when the salesperson is interviewing the customer and deciding on what the customer problem we're trying to solve is? Do I wait until the product manager? So maybe the product manager has defined the problem to be solved. Maybe the product manager is, has already defined the problem. So, you get there's a bunch of decisions that you can make, and that's just really an individual decision, having the conversation with the people who are part of the value stream on how wide or narrow that would be. Does that answer the question? So I see here, super basic value stream question. If you have data and that is viewed via reports by the customer, is the value stream collecting the data and populating a report with it? If you are a safe org, if one team does the data and other does the reports shouldn't be on the same arts. I'm not sure I'm really getting
I mean, I
the,
think the way that I understand this and the way that it happens very often is like if you're on a safe art or like it doesn't matter if you're doing scaled agile framework or not, like
yeah.
different teams measure different things. And what do you do in those type of situations? I think Jason, is that in a nutshell your question?
I mean, pretty much. To me, it's like, okay, well, I can understand that maybe there's different teams because there's a lot of reports, but like to me, it doesn't make sense to have one group providing the data and they do their planning with a bunch of other teams, and then another team that has the reports that use that data is doing planning, and we're very unconnected. To me, it seems like
Right.
the value stream is, hey, here's the data, we put it
Mhm.
into reports, the customers look at the reports and they get the value. So why are not those teams should be connected to me? And right now they're on separate arts in my org, and I'm just like banging my head on the
Well,
desk saying WTF.
Oh, right.
that's
Yes.
very typical with safe, right? I mean, like that's why like I think it's like uh anyway, I'm taking away. So Heidi, please go ahead and
Yeah, no problem. And by the way, so um I there's a lot of tips here at the end, and then of course I'm happy to answer questions. So if we run out of time, you can connect with me on LinkedIn, ask me a question. I'll be happy to answer your question or so. So okay, so imagine that we are going to collaborate and mapping the current state and getting the relevant information, right? First, we define the purpose of the value stream. We have to ensure the correct focus, right? So this is going to be more important than you think. So at the beginning of every workshop activity, I get people to collaborate and provide a shared understanding and verbiage on what is the purpose of the value stream? Why does it exist? So in this case, the team came up with to provide the policy data that agents and internal customers need in a fast, secure way so they can efficiently and effectively serve their customers. I'm not going to cover, well, I'll only briefly cover the future state today, but when you're doing this activity and people begin to have questions, this is a great orientation if you're especially the facilitator to say, okay, is this really solving the problem of providing policy data? Because people will tend to go off into tangents, and reorienting them to this purpose is going to be really important. So after you've got the purpose done in the workshop, we're going to map the current state. And so I have here what you do is you're anchoring the start and end of your activities. This is all animated. I was trying to make it just super easy for folks to get started if they've never done value stream mapping before. So we're defining the feature, and then it's in production already, right? So we anchor the start and end, and now we're going to work backwards from delivery. So before it's operating production, we have to deploy it. Before deploying, we have to do security review, et cetera, right? It's acceptance. This is just one, little view here. We have to also make sure that we stick to our feature level. So we decided we're doing the feature level. It's going to be in production, and you'll see that people also get derailed. They'll go dig deep into the develop stage, and maybe they'll go to the task level and so just reorient folks back up to the, feature level. And so after you do that, I would typically define like which teams are involved in this value stream, right? So I have different color stickies and I put them up there. This, it's pretty revealing. And so the security review, now we find out that Pat is the lone person there. And maybe that's why Pat hasn't gotten to the security review yet. So here we begin to talk about some of those things, right? And having those conversations. And throughout, while you're doing this, people will be talking. And so you'll be taking, someone will be taking notes. Next stage is we're going to map the durations and delays. These numbers might look different for your organization, but really just get a sense of the relative idea. And by the way, this is representative of many organizations that I've worked in. So when it says 40 days for if the PM is, looking to define and prepare the feature, well, they have other things they're working at the same time, right? A designer, well, a few designers left. Of course, they're trying to do lots of things. So it might just be a 30-minute change, but really takes a long turnaround time. When we're doing the actual value stream mapping activity, and I have not included these because it would get so messy, but really you're going to see lots of lines being drawn, around people talking to each other. So remember, don't forget the information flow is also something that you should be, drawing. If there's rework here, then you'd add arrows back. So you're thinking about the durations. And like, oh, Pat, it only takes 1 day for, Pat to do the security review. So now you're having these conversations with people and adding up the delays. And I added this up a bunch of times. So now you see if you've talked through the durations. If you don't have data, people are going to talk about it. If you do have data, that's great. And the delays in between, again, we're talking about, just average things here. It's going to take more, a year to get something done. This is not unusual if you're talking about a feature inside a large enterprise. So whether these numbers are representative or not for your organization, you're going to find that a few things might stick out to you. Like, why is there 90 days here? Maybe they have a quarterly planning and we missed the planning. And so now we have to wait for the next quarter. Right. So thinking about these, thinking about these things for your organization, this is when you really start talking through the things that people begin to notice in the current state. All right. So let me just see any question. Okay. Thank you. All right. Here's where we go. It's not the map that matters. So then you have people, why didn't you just go off and do, oh, go ahead.
You said that there was a quick question. Just where does 90 days come from? If you could just go back and help.
Oh, yeah. So in this particular case, we were talking through how long does it take in between, like the waiting time. So it was a conversation in the value stream mapping workshop itself, because we didn't have all the data that was needed to talk about the delays in between. So people who showed up said is about 90 days, so we used a gut feel for those. So that's where the 90 days came. And because we know that this org did quarterly planning, if you've missed the cutoff, then it's certainly going to be, you have to wait till the next quarter to do. So, okay. All right. So now you've got this, you're at a great state. However, it's not the map that matters. I've had people tell me, well, Heidi, can't you just go off and create the map yourself? Well, people will be taking notes. If you're the facilitator, you're going to have a bunch of different stickies. And I would just, when people start talking and you talk about the, 90 days, you're going to take notes. People say, well, we missed the quarterly cutoff. And so that might be a note that you're going to take just as a representation of a conversation that happened. And now we begin to have conversations around why does that happen and why we missed the cutoff. And is that the way we want to continue to work? So those conversations are crucial, and it will build empathy, because remember, everyone was frustrated at Pat, the security person, for not doing the security review. But now we find out that Pat is just one person. There's all these different priorities that Pat is trying to deal with. And so this leads to joint problem solving. So the map is a representation for the conversations that happen, kind of like a user story, a placeholder for a conversation. Well, the map is the representation of the conversations that happen, but it can't really replace it. It can't just hand someone the map. You're going to talk through the challenges together as a team. This is just some that I came up with from Alex's team, right? They discovered that every team has a different priority. Agent support tickets are coming into the team frequently. Everything is a priority for Pat. They don't know. And I got all this unplanned work. So you talk through the challenges. Maybe you group them together now. You're beginning to consolidate and group them. And these are just some typical challenges. So I did update the presentation right before, so I will put it on a speaker deck and I'll throw it in the chat. Handoffs, too much work in progress. No way to collect good metrics. There is actually no understanding of what good looks like. Manual reviews and rework, challenges with environments. All of these are typical challenges that might come up in value stream mapping activities. So just be prepared for some of those if you're the facilitator and understand those. Okay, so let's say that you've gotten through that phase. And now everyone has got it out, what all the problems were. Now is your turn to ideate. You're going to identify opportunities to improve. Harken back to the lean agile principles and the 8 ways that we talked about before. So the group is going to come together now and identify possible actions to improve. Some of them, right? I'm going to chat with legal up front to see if any compliance things exist. Get security to work with us on secure coding practices. Maybe it doesn't always have to be just Pat. Automate security scans and so on. Okay. Last thing, now you've got all these ideas and all these challenges. It's now time to plan. You'll have failed if you exited this without having a plan to prioritize and act upon the ideas. Just like in a retrospective, It's not enough just to come up with ideas. You've got to plan them. So this is a simple ease impact matrix. There are things that you have come up with as a group that will be easier to do, that maybe will be higher impact, and you put those as quick wins. There are some that will be harder to do, but very high impact, and those are more long-term solutions. And of course, if there are, harder to do and lower impact, you would avoid them altogether, and there might just be some, quick action. So you now move those stickies onto this ease impact matrix, and now you can have those conversations as a team about which one of those many things that you probably came up with that you would want to work on. So Alex's team at Good Life decided to introduce regular prioritization and alignment meetings, because that was one of the big things. Integrate and automate approval steps into the pipeline, include security and solution design, add some automated controls, and train others on the API, because they're going to have to know this was the proof of concept. So that's it. 4 simple steps to improving your organization: prepare, collaborate, ideate, and plan. But wait, there's more. There are some results I've experienced, so I'm going to go through these without talking through every single one. These are not outstanding. They happen in almost every single value stream mapping session that I have gone through. There's an amazing, once people see the things that they haven't seen before, there's just an amazing reaction where they want to go ahead and work on these things. And of course, you have to take action on it, not just finish the workshop and come up with the plan. So there are just 7 more tips I have to give you, because maybe you don't even have buy-in for a day-long activity or a few hours activity. So every scenario is different. I mentioned it before. You might need to pick a different name. Value stream as a name doesn't resonate with everyone, especially if they have been through a safe transformation and maybe they're looking to, maybe they're still in safe, or maybe they want to move away from that. So gone are the days when I wanted to call it value stream mapping and insist that that's what it was, and we call it. Nope, I have called it a process streamlining activity. I've called it delivery planning. I've had people really like value assessment or path to production, are all things that people really liked a bit more than just value stream mapping. So find what works in your organization. The second tip is you have to work with the willing. Gain buy-in for the activity, or it will be a hollow victory to actually have done the activity, because none of the action items will be able to be done. So only do what people are ready for. I'm going to give you more tips around how to do that. And ensure that people understand the value it adds and what problems it solves, right? So if you're having trouble to get buy-in at the high level, maybe you want to start by narrowing the scope or going down a level. So maybe we start with artifact creation, all the way to validation. And now we have a different level of items where it's mostly in minutes and hours. So again, you would focus on where you get the biggest impact. So look at, why is there 24 hours waiting time here? Look at, there's 12 hours and 4 hours here. So listen to pain points as in your organization before and during mapping to guide the scope and the information. And of course, you want to focus where you get the biggest impact. All right, so still, I have had trouble getting buy-in, and so you could always do some upfront work and interview. So this worked really well for the one that had like 25 teams. So we did some upfront work. I work with the technical program manager to find out who of all those 25 teams, what they needed as far as inputs and outputs, who was the point person on the team. After some interviews, we were able to draft the value stream map and then show it to others and get feedback. Now, they might say that it was wrong, which is great. That's actually what we want. But now they give us feedback because they have something to see. And I think that Al had brought that up as one of the things that he had done as well, is to do a sample value stream map. Another tip that you could do is to start with a happy future state. So happy future state is part of the full value stream mapping activity. So if the organization is really struggling right now and people have buy-in, well, why not just don't even talk about the current state? Well, let's just move to a happy future state. So imagine this is Alex's organization at Good Life, and they were able to start with a happy future state. Imagine that they collaborated up front and just focused on one initiative at a time. Right? They could move some of that time down from 40 days to 10 days and remove those delays because everybody is oriented to the same thing. So when you do an activity like this with a future happy state, it is not because we'll get to that future happy state anytime soon, but because people now see a vision and a future where they had not seen one before. And for this, it's a very different mindset than the diagnosis mindset. And so I always start the future happy state out with a happy vision, like a vision of the future. So I have the team come up with a vision of the future that they want and orient them that way. I'm really trying to keep mindful of the time too. So this is one of the other things. When you get started with the value stream mapping, people aren't sure what to expect. So if it's in person, I print these out on 8.5 by 11, each one of the ones 1 through 8, and I print those, tape those up on the wall. Or if it's in a Miro board, it's easy, right? You can just cut and paste there. And then I have people think about the wastes in their particular context. What kind of handoffs are they experiencing, and what kind of partially done work do they have? That gets them starting to think in this mindset, and also kind of loosens the group up to the value stream mapping activity itself. All right, so then you would put the stickies on the board and talk about the stickies during your value stream mapping activity. All right, so you need to alter your approach to fit the situation. If there's one thing that we've learned through this conference with all the people that we're saying is there's no one way to approach the situation. Focus where it matters, include information if it seems useful, avoid information that doesn't add value. So for example, I was doing like part of a checkout process. Well, every part of that process took seconds. There was one that took 12 seconds, which is the longest part. But then generating the invoice and sending it back to the customer could take up to 105 days when there was a missed transaction. So I didn't focus on deciding how many seconds or minutes it was. The pain was really the 105 days, right? Sometimes you'll have to work with people who cannot attend. So in one case, we had the marketing team that was kind of accepting the work from the team, and we couldn't get their buy-in to show up for those 2 days. And so the team was able to move ahead without them, but we actually had great conversations in there about how to get the marketing team more involved in the whole value stream and care more about what they were doing, because they would never accept the stories and wouldn't be important anymore. So we actually had a great conversation even when they were not able to attend. And that's a reality that I've also had to deal with there, where we include that in the value stream. They're part of the value stream, and we had to forge ahead without them. And it was still a great learning. So some ideas to get started are, if you're on a team, map your team's workflow. Just remember there's a customer at the end. Map a value stream that you interact with frequently, or you might want to map a typical request for your customer, or a process where people express frustration, like a hiring or recruiting process. Lastly, I was working in a VP, a product in a former company, and trying to get making progress on value stream mapping. He was on board, but the other guy was not on board. His partner, the VP of engineering. So when I told him what we had done, investigating and putting this map together by doing interviews and getting feedback on it, he kind of gave me a smile and he goes, "Well, Heidi, you always tell us to work small." So I think that was the right approach. So I give you these tips and I leave you with this. If you're working inside an organization and you cannot get buy-in, any step forward is better than no step forward. The idea of value streams are so, so important. Try to take what I've shared with you, define your own next step. It might be different, but I hope you can really make progress with value stream mapping and value streams inside your organization. And we have just a few minutes left. So here for questions, and connect with me on LinkedIn if you want to share more.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Heidi. We do have maybe a few minutes, so we're going to then take a 10-minute break, and Pavel is going to start in about 11 minutes from now. So if you're open, we can take a couple of questions, and for those of you that want to take a break, and then we'll continue with Pavel with the last presentation, session 3 for today. Any questions for Heidi? Well, I can always go back up to a couple of questions that were, but maybe you answered those. So if you have any questions for Heidi, Jesse. Yep.
Sorry, I couldn't find my mute button. Hi, Heidi.
Hi.
That was really great to listen to. Thank you so much. I'm hoping that you will share your slides with us because I think that they have a lot that I want to leverage, if you wouldn't mind. So, and then my question for you though is, you stopped your presentation on the action plan. And one of the challenges that we have found is just sustaining the momentum around the action plan. Like once we're finished with a rapid improvement event or a Kaizen, there's a lot of energy, but then just keeping it going. And we have owners of the action plan designated and everything, but they're busy and they're responding to their leadership on multiple priorities. And we have executive sponsors as well, but they're also, it's hard to sustain their enthusiasm over time as well. So anyway, anything that you can speak to on strategies of keeping it going.
Yeah. The way I have found is do the quick wins first, because if they see progress, then they're more likely to want to keep going. But if you pick really large activities and then there's no progress seen, then not. So try to focus on some of those really early quick wins. And it sounds also like there isn't a lot of buy-in to keep the momentum going. So they might have owners and, you said, well, everyone is very busy, but hopefully those people the sponsors could ask their managers and their executive sponsors to actively champion for those things. Like if you're the executive sponsor, are they actually actively championing? Like I had a really great experience where I had my direct manager and the VP were like Heidi champions, and it would always be, oh, look what Heidi's doing. Come in and speak in my organization and tell us what you've been doing lately. So make sure that they could also get their own champions going on there. So ask for those things as well if you're not getting them.
Okay. Thank you. And can I ask one more question? I know there's other
Yeah.
people who want to ask questions, but when you talked about scope and how sometimes you just need to start smaller, one of the things that I always feel like is such a risk when you cut down on scope, um, is that if you cut it too finely, you might end up making changes that have unintended consequences outside of the scope. So could you talk to us a little bit about how you make those decisions? That would be really helpful.
Yeah. So if that's so, for example, in the let's say Alex's team and the product manager, so if we missed the product manager part where we would have cut out like what 120 days because it took them 40 days and there was a 90-day delay. So then I would say, yeah, we're actually missing a big part of the value stream here and include that. And then if the product manager didn't attend, just kind of talk around there and see what you could do to get the metrics and the representation for that product manager person. So yeah, if you feel like you're cutting it and they won't attend, like I would just say, here's what we've done this so far, we're like missing your piece, and show them and try to get their buy-in to giving
Okay.
some more information there.
Yeah. Okay.
You wouldn't want to
Thank
do
you.
that. Yeah.
All right, Vicky and then Arnold, if we can squeeze them too, I think that'll be it. Again, we're on break. We have about
Yep.
7 more minutes, but Heidi has been great and willing to stay. So, Vicky,
Yeah, thanks so much, Heidi. That was such a fantastic breakdown because as I'm listening to you and I'm watching the presentation, I'm thinking through times when either I was rushed or I was in a business unit or something that said, if you're going to do this, let's just hurry up and get it over with. And then I didn't break down and go through all the steps. The results were not what everyone had hoped for. So it's not really a question, just to say you did a great job in breaking that down. And it just really made me think about times when we skipped things and we didn't get the results that we could have, and we didn't have the effect that we wanted.
Thank you, Vicky. Thank you.
Arnold.
Yes, question on Heidi. This is very useful. Thank you very much for all your presentation. My question is, when we do the value stream mapping, oftentimes we find that things are not quite everything sequential. So why are we waiting for something to happen? We can start with other process. So in that case, you have like an in parallel process. Now, how do you calculate those value added time and the lead time?
As best as you can. So the very simplified diagram doesn't capture all those. So you would just add those. And I mean, there are some metrics around, okay, I can get started with this, as well, I get started with that. So, well, if it's the same team, that will kind of slow them down as well, right? If they're trying to do many things. But so build the map. It doesn't have to be a linear flow. It could be whatever flow works well for you, and just try to capture them as well as possible, and then get feedback on whether those are realistic. But surely something will come out of there that informs the team what next steps they should be taking just by visualizing it, even if we know that the numbers aren't completely exact because they don't exist.
Yeah, we'll try to be as real as possible, whatever makes sense.
Yeah. And
All
one
right.
of the outcomes is also that people decide there is no way we have now of measuring this. And that's actually one thing we're going to go do. When we finish this value stream mapping activity, it's an action to go and try to understand, get the data. Like, let's actually figure out what we want to be seeing and get that. So the next time we do the value stream mapping, we actually have the information we need.